how do you know if it is time to grow or if it's time to move on? One of my favorite ways to look at this is to first examine what the normal process of growth or change looks like. So, this is a concept called the emotional cycle of change. This was created by Don Kelly and Daryl Connor. Oh, and I want you to like, if anybody wants these slides because like taking notes makes you anxious and then you can't like actually take in the information, I can always like send these slides out. So afterwards you can contact me and be like, hey, can you email these to me? Like, I just didn't want to, I wanted to be able to just listen and take it in. We can do that. So the emotional cycle of change, this comes from a human resource training manual, and it's kind of just whatever the predictable patterns that humans go through when they encounter change. Okay, awesome. Um, and so you can see that there's this curve here where we start off in this stage one with uninformed optimism, and I'll go into each of these, in detail. And then we dip below this line that separates optimism and pessimism. And we kind of dip below it into informed pessimism, go down into this valley of despair, have an opportunity to go back or push forward and to get back to the optimism and finding success and fulfillment. But I'll like describe what each of these stages is like in greater detail. So when you're in that stage one, the uninformed optimism, everything is thrilling. The stage is thrilling because you can imagine all of the possibilities, but you haven't experienced any of the costs or despair or pain of actually having to go through this change or create this project or explore this idea yet. So it's exciting, it's new, it's full of potential. It's like, this is the best idea that I've ever had. Like we all know that feeling of just like this is magic. Like I've got something incredible here. Um, and almost without fail, something happens along the way. Either a character's not coming to us quite as smoothly as we hoped, or we realize that there's a plot point that just feels like a big like block and we just are like, I don't know what needs to happen here. And we just start to feel stuck and and we start to realize the effort that it's actually going to make to create this thing. And that starts to become a little bit daunting. And that's when you start to wonder, is this really worth the struggle? Is this really worth the effort? And so then your brain starts to look for reasons to duck out. It's like, oh, actually, I know this was a lot of fun. Great. It was a fun idea in the first place. But actually, I see the reality of what this is going to take and I'm scared. And so your brain's like, is there a reason that maybe I should not do this? And then usually like sometimes you kind of just push through and it's like, okay, actually, no, I can do this. But inevitably, at some point in the creative process, whether it's while you're drafting, whether while you're revising, while you're querying, or while you're trying to get it published, something happens somewhere along that journey that is where you hit this valley of despair. And this is really usually the lowest point where many people will give up because you start to feel all of the pain of change, but you don't really see any of the benefits. Like maybe your novel is half formed and you're like, it doesn't even really look like a full thing. Maybe going back, maybe giving up, maybe just starting a fresh idea will be the best option here. But the difficulty is that in this valley of despair, and I'll talk about the difference between like hitting this point where it is like, no, actually, this idea is not one that I want to dive into, and it feels very centered and all of that. We'll dive into kind of the difference. But when you hit this valley of despair, and this is an idea that actually does resonate with you, and you do want to continue to develop it, but you hit this deep point, you can choose to go back and maybe explore a different idea and just like, I'm just going to choose something else. I'm just going to do something else. Inevitably, what I've seen time and time again, sometimes it is just the project wasn't right. But what I see a lot is that if a writer hasn't developed that ability to push through this valley of despair to kind of rally the troops, get the support that they need, problem solve the way that they need to, then they can explore a brand new project, but then eventually they hit this valley of despair again. And and we need to build those tools of resilience for any project, even one that it feels golden. Um, Inevitably, we're going to hit a point where the process is difficult. Um, But if we can move through that valley of despair, we reach this stage of informed optimism because you've been able to continue and you can see the benefits. Um, you can actually see things starting to bear fruit. You can see those scenes that are sparking. You can see things coming to life. And you actually can see that pushing forward was worth it after all. And so the key here is to actually continue and not be so satisfied with almost succeeding that you give up, or you're like, oh, awesome, like I'm doing pretty good. I'll get to it. I'll get to it at some point. I'll finish that at some point. But if you push through and continue, then you start to experience success, fulfillment. The benefits of your new behaviors or of pushing forward on this project are fully experienced, and the cost of change is now perceived as worth it. Like, okay, it was worth it to go through those times when I was crying and I was looking at this and I was frustrated and I had my hands in my hair and all of those things. And you've developed the resilience to be able to move through those moments with even more confidence. And the things that were once difficult and really uncomfortable, they're part of your routine, even if they are still uncomfortable